My name is Peggy Tous, and I am here to interview Sherri Bode. Sherri, welcome.
Thank you.
And I'd like to have you just tell a little bit about your history from the time you were living in Washington as a little girl, and tell us a little bit about your family.
I was born in 1940, and my father at the time was working at Scattered Steel. He was a tool and die maker. He was helping with the war initiative. And when I turned 5, we moved to National. He went into the ministry, and we moved to National, which is a little town at the foot of Mount Rainier. Just a beautiful little place.
Yeah.
And it was nestled right next to some woods. It was a very special place. In the winter was just covered with snow. And I went to kindergarten, first grade there. And I had never been away from my mom. I was a mama's girl.
Oh boy.
And so she took me to kindergarten, plopped me down and left. I just thought the world had come to an end. I cried and screamed, and the kindergarten teacher locked the door on me, so I couldn't get out.
Of course, you were the baby of the family, right?
Yes.
And what number child were you?
Number 5.
Number 5.
And my sister Pat said that every day on the bus for weeks I would cry all the way to school. But finally I got used to it, except for the split pea soup that they served for lunch. It was so horrible.
You've never liked it since, right?
I like it now.
Oh, you do? Oh, okay, that's good. All right, and you told us that your dad was a tool and die maker and a pastor, right?
Yeah.
So
And
how did you like being a pastor's kid?
Oh, I didn't mind it at all. But his trade before he became a minister was very helpful, because we were at small churches, and he would help to support us that way. I remember as a little girl, he would rewire motors,
Yeah.
and all the parts would be all over the living room floor. He would be working on them.
Oh, my.
But at least he was at home, so that was nice.
That's good. Can you tell us a little bit of perhaps a big highlight for you when you were a little girl growing up?
When I was very small, a highlight was our pastor and his wife were my babysitter, and their daughter was slightly retarded, but loved me very much. And so I would go over to their house, and they had a big bottle of buttons, and so I would dump the bottle out on the floor and sort the buttons. It was a very special thing.
Oh, how fun.
And then I would talk the pastor into helping me put them back in the bottle again, because then I had to clean up. That was so much fun.
Yeah.
And the pastor's wife taught me how to set a table.
Oh.
So that was very special. And then when I would go home, and I was about 3, and they would all crowd around the telephone, and I would sing to them over the phone.
Oh, so you've been singing since you were 3 already.
Yeah.
That's where you got your little bird's voice. So when you got to be a little bit older, did you move to another city?
Well, when I was 4, before we went to National, we went to Arizona for, I think, 6 months. Daddy had gone down with Bob, which is where Bob met Betty. And they worked there for about 3 months, and then Mother and the girls and I came down. And I remember the trip on the way down, Pat and I were in the back seat just having a great old time. And finally Mother got frustrated with all the noise we were making, so she stopped the car and pulled Pat out of the back seat. And I came too, because we tied our legs together.
Oh.
And then Mother thought it was funny, so it turned out okay.
Oh, wow. So you did get yourself in trouble once in a while.
A little bit. And there was a school there. Betty's father was the principal. They were very strict. You couldn't wear short sleeves, so I had to wear my coat in the middle of summer in Arizona.
Oh, dear.
Because I didn't have enough long sleeve dresses. And you couldn't sing anything but Christian songs. So Pat and Donna and I would go to the outhouse lock the door and sing "Don't Fence Me In" at the top of our lungs.
Oh my, you're little rebels, huh? Okay, now,
Other than that, about the worst thing we did was at Grandview, we'd sit in prayer meeting and sing different verses than the rest of the crowd.
oh dear, sounds like fun. So tell me, when you got to be old enough to go to university, what caused you to choose APU?
Well, when I was in Seattle, I wasn't in Seattle, but they had a choir that went to Seattle, and my cousin was in the choir. So we went to hear them, and I just was so taken because at that time Seattle Pacific Choir was very stiff and stodgy, and APU Choir was just alive.
Oh.
So I said, if I do music, I want to go to APU. It was Azusa College at that time.
Yeah.
And if I do English, I'll go to Seattle Pacific because I knew they had a good English department. And so I applied to both schools, and I got a bigger scholarship to APU. And I knew that if I didn't come down quite a ways from home, I would never cut the apron strings.
I see, so that was tough.
That was a big part of the motivation.
Oh, wow. So when you did come to California, did you live in the dorms?
Yes.
Uh-huh.
Actually, the dorm that we lived in my first 2 years was what's now called the Rose Garden. Was like a patio area, and quite pretty.
And were you an excellent student right from the beginning?
Well, I worked very hard. I was a pretty good student.
And did you decide then that music was going to be your major? So,
And that was partly because my sophomore year in high school, we were in Canada, and our band director was just marvelous, and he was also the orchestra director, and he inspired me.
Great. So it sounds like you've lived in a lot of different places as a young girl, didn't you? And did that bother you, or was that okay as long as you were all together with your family? That's good. Now tell me, how long before you met Hank when you were in California?
Well, the summer after my freshman year, my cousin was getting married, the one that had been in the choir that I had come down to be with. She was a senior and I was a freshman. And she asked me to be a candlelighter in her wedding. So in order to do that, I needed to stay with somebody until the wedding, which was a couple weeks after school was out. And so I stayed with my brother Bob, and he got me a job at Marshburn Farms packing carrots.
Oh. And what did your brother Bob do?
He was a pastor also.
He was a pastor in a Free Methodist church, right?
Yes.
Okay.
Beautiful church with a gorgeous stained glass window at the back.
Yes, right. I was there too. It's really special, wasn't it?
Yeah.
Okay, so then progress forward and tell us how you met Hank.
So I think it was the first Sunday after school was out, Jim Schroff said, I have somebody I want you to meet. So he took me to the back of the church, that was after church was out, and introduced me to Hank, and I thought, oh my goodness. I had seen Hank before. Bob had gone to, he had taken me, I think Betty was ill, and so he took me to something at Knott's Berry Farm, and I saw Hank in the distance talking to Bob, and I said, I'd like to marry somebody that looks like that.
Oh, wow. Wow. I had no idea. I hadn't heard that.
Yeah.
So, so then what happened for things to progress from there?
Well, I don't remember what it was then, but before long Hank asked me out.
And where did you go on your first date?
We went to Youth for Christ in Long Beach.
Oh, did you?
And he got lost.
Oh, well, that's a family trait. We like to get lost. Did he do it on purpose, by accident?
I think it was accident. And I had to go to the bathroom really bad, but I was scared to say anything.
Oh, my. So
then,
then,
when we got to Bob and Betty's, I invited him in, hoping he wasn't going to come because I had to go to the bathroom. And of course he came in.
Oh, my. So, were you excited after that first date?
Yeah.
Yeah? And did you guys become steady after that?
No, not really. Because at that time he was going with somebody else.
Oh, he was.
So he said he needed to
in that relationship before he would start dating you, or did he make any kind of commitment to you at that time?
He didn't make any commitment to me, but we'd had an awfully good time together.
That's good.
And he said he had something that he needed to do.
Well, obviously he did.
And
Mhm.
I decided I really needed to work a little bit more before I went home. So I stayed another couple of weeks with my brother.
Packing carrots, huh?
Yeah.
I'm sure that was fun. So then, tell me a little bit about how Hank proposed to you.
Well, we were upstairs in the apartment, and he asked me to marry him, and it just totally took me off guard, and so I said, "Have you prayed about it?" Of course
This
he
was
had.
the apartment upstairs at 310?
Yeah.
Oh my. Wow. So, was his answer yes?
No.
He hadn't prayed about it?
No.
Oh.
So it let me off the hook for a little while.
Wow.
Of course, next time he asked, I was ready.
Well, that's great. Then when you were planning your wedding, tell me a little bit about that. It was a little bit complicated since I was involved myself.
I had written down all the things that needed to be done and had a list for everybody and gave them the list ahead of time. And the day of the wedding, I asked them, and they'd lost their lists.
Oh.
So it's chaotic.
And what was even more chaotic is that the wedding was where?
Was in Sunnyvale.
In Sunnyvale, but was in Washington.
Yeah.
And where was Sherri at the time she was making these lists?
California.
Uh-huh, yeah. So that made it a little bit more difficult. And so the night before the wedding, what were you busy doing?
Fixing the headdresses.
Stayed up all night with your mother, right? Doing the headpieces for the girls, for the bridesmaids. I had the privilege of being one of those bridesmaids, so I remember that very well. Okay, so what would you like to share after you went to Niagara Falls for your honeymoon?
Well, we planned to go to Alberta, to Lake Louise, but had no idea how far it was. It was like a 2 or 3 day trip, and we didn't have that much time for our honeymoon, so instead we went up to BC, British Columbia, and went to Butchart Gardens and Vancouver.
It was lovely.
It was very, very nice.
So then when you came back from your honeymoon, what was Hank doing at the time? Get your pillow. Yeah, go ahead, speak.
He was working at Coster Hay Company, and I was going to school. Daddy had made him promise that if we got married, he would let me finish school. So I was a senior, getting my senior recital ready. And I had senioritis so badly, I just didn't even want to finish school. But even though I was married, that was my best academic year. I had 4.0 that year.
Yeah. And you graduated with what rank? What was your
Magna cum laude.
Yeah, awesome, huh? So then after you finished, then what
Then I
was
got pregnant.
that was a big event, right?
Yeah.
And Mr. Brian made his appearance,
Yeah.
right? And how old was Brian when Suzanne was born?
He was 2.5.
2.5. So how did it feel to be a mommy of 2 small children?
Scary. I had not really babysat as a teenager much, so I was pretty overwhelmed. But it was still pretty wonderful.
Yeah, of course it was. So can you tell me, since we all talked about the war a little bit, was there any way that you in your life were aware of what the history was, of what was going on in Europe and what had gone on with Japan?
I really wasn't.
Nothing at all, huh? So you were just way past that stage of even being in any way inconvenienced or heard about it or anything like that. Did your daddy serve in the service?
No, actually I think he had a heart problem, so
Oh, yeah, that's right.
he served in his work was in a foundry, was like a factory which made uh, made things for the war effort.
I see. Well, that was a great contribution, I'm sure, as well. Okay, now, do you want to fast forward to some other portion of your history, that maybe something fun that happened, or something special with your family, or anything like that?
Mm.
So tell me about your music career, because you ended up being a teacher at Azusa Pacific University, and what did you have to do to get to that point?
Well, I was thinking about when the kids got to be junior high age, I was going to go back to school and get a master's. And so I had a phone call from the dean of the School of Music at that time and said, "We're needing a teacher." And I said, "Give me 2 years." And he said, "Oh, it's now or never." So I jumped in.
Mm-hmm.
So I taught part-time. And I got all the disgruntled kids,
Oh, my.
which was okay because I was different from their other teacher.
Mm-hmm. They could enjoy it, huh?
Yeah.
So then how long did it take you before you did get your degree? Because you did go after that, didn't
Yeah,
you?
I started school that fall. I think it took probably 4 years or so.
And did you enjoy that process?
I did.
You are basically really a student, aren't you? You do love that.
I love going to school,
Yeah.
though I don't love exams.
Well,
But you learn how to take them.
Yeah, I'm sure you do. And many times you would do performances at APU, where I've been myself, and heard you sing. And how did you feel about those kind of things?
I enjoyed them very much because my old teacher was the person who did the operettas and the oratorios, and so he always called me back for those. So those were really lots of fun.
Yeah.
Much easier than a recital.
Mm-hmm. So now, as far as progressing with your music career, so did you direct the choir at your church as well?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah? How long did you do that?
Well, I started when the kids were babies at Ontario, and then I directed at Azusa for probably 6 or 7 years, and then I got busy, so
And did you give piano lessons as well to some of your students, and
I gave
private
piano lessons
lessons?
to my neighborhood kids,
Uh-huh. And what about
and Suzanne and Brian were part of that group.
uh-huh. Now, I remember also many family parties in the backyard in your famous swimming pool. And what was one of the great fears that you had when you first bought that house?
The swimming pool was terrifying to me because I didn't learn to swim until I was a mother.
Mm-hmm.
And I learned to swim just so I could rescue my kids.
Mm-hmm.
And I didn't want to buy the house because I was afraid they'd drown in the pool.
Mm-hmm.
And so Dr. Ford, the person we bought the house from, said, "Okay, I'll fix that." So he put a lock on the sliding glass door up high where nobody could reach it except an adult.
Mm-hmm.
And so that was always locked,
Mm-hmm.
and except when we had family parties, and then we were out with the kids.
Yeah, I remember a lot of...
And they learned how to swim like little fish.
Oh, of course they did, yeah. I remember being at family parties, and always great fun to be able to take a dip in your pool. So are there highlights about people in your life in this area that perhaps you want to say something about?
Well, my voice teacher had a profound effect on my life. He would not only teach, but he would philosophize during lessons. And he had grown up in a Nazarene church, which was similar to my church.
Mm-hmm.
So he always had lots of helpful things to say, even though later on I discovered that his teaching was not really the best for my voice because I don't have a large voice, and he tried to make it sound bigger than it really was.
Mm.
So later on, when I went to Cal State Fullerton, I learned better ways to handle my voice.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Did you have an opportunity to have an influence on any particular student's life while you were teaching and doing what you did best at the APU?
Well, about 3 years into my teaching career, a student came and said, "Can we start the lesson with prayer?" And I said to myself, why didn't I think of that myself?
Mm-hmm.
So after that, I always started lessons with prayer. I would say, "Do you have any prayer requests?" And I'd pray for that. And that was a wonderful way to influence kids.
Yeah, great.
And one of the students who came was a girl from Taiwan, and she was a Buddhist,
Mm-hmm.
and her family were Buddhist. And her mother had a stroke during that time, so we started praying for her mother, and her mother was really touched. And she went back home after she graduated. She became my accompanist. And I prayed for her. And about a year ago, she came back to on a work visa for a year, teaching piano. And she got in touch with me,
Oh,
and I found out that she had been baptized in Taiwan.
wow.
She was afraid to become a Christian because she was afraid her folks wouldn't allow it.
Oh,
And she said, "I asked my parents if I could be baptized. My mother was all excited about it. But my father," she said, "I think my father wasn't paying attention when we took a walk and said yes."
oh my, that is awesome.
But her whole family came to the baptism.
Wow.
And now I have a Bible study with her once a week.
Oh, wow, so that's a long...
It's very special.
Yeah, I can see that. Okay, are there a few other things that you might like to share with the family?
Well, we have recently downsized, and I would not have been ready for that except that our pastor did a series on simplicity, simplifying your life and getting rid of extras, and I was really convicted by that. And so when Hank said, "Should we downsize?" and I liked the place where we moved, so I said, "Sure." But I said, "Lord, you know I'm not well organized. How am I ever going to do this?" And he gave me a verse that said, "You shall not leave in haste." I think that was for the Israelites. "But you shall go out in peace." So I just hung on to that verse and said, "Lord, how are you going to do this?" And he sent an angel named Peggy to come and help me.
Well, it was my pleasure.
So we didn't move in haste.
No. And you have a cozy, cute place that you're
Thank
living
you.
in.
And I love it. The only thing I miss is my yard, but
yeah. Well, you can't have it all, huh, as they say. So did you have something you want to say in closing, or do you feel like you're satisfied